Okay, guys, so we're on one of our last lessons, and you should remember this because we did it probably within this last 2 months, okay? So, up here? Okay. Energy and matter in ecosystem. So remember, energy flows throughout the ecosystem. Up here. So we did talk about the cycles, the carbon cycle, oxygen cycle, water cycle, nitrogen cycle. Energy flows when one organism eats another, gets its energy, okay? Energy flows from the sun into autotrophs or producers. That's, the biggest source. That's where everything starts. Also, energy recycles when decomposers break down dead stuff, putting the nitrogen and the carbon back into the ground, gets reabsorbed by plants. Plants use it to grow. Plants get eaten. You eat those plants. It's in you. So carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, all this stuff just cycles throughout the universe, okay? Okay, so there are 2 reasons why animals use camouflage. Because they're being preyed upon by a predator and trying to hide for safety, or because they are a predator and they're trying to ambush their prey. So not only are we talking about energy flowing throughout the ecosystem, now we're talking about some adaptations or just some real world examples of what's going on. Because I'll tell you what, I will never be able to prepare you for the STAR test weird questions on these animals that are usually local to Texas. But just always think about okay, what are they trying to ask me? What are they trying to relate to? Okay, so one of the things I do try to relate to is predator, prey, camouflaging, stuff like that. So when we talk about this stuff, I have about 4 or 5 questions talking about camouflage-ish kind of predator-prey questions. So let's do these together. Number 1, species of the genus Toxicodendron, which includes poison ivy, poison oak, produce a gummy oil that causes a severe itchy rash in some animals. This substance is part of the Toxicodendron species, don't shout it out, defense mechanism, nutritional process, support system, clinging ability. Okay, circle it at your seat. I'm going to come around and check it. So, produce a gummy oil that causes severe itchy rash in some animals. Which part is it part of? What do y'all think? Which one is it?
Never mind. Wrong thing.
So I hear C.
I put clinging ability.
I put A.
Okay.
Yeah,
If something secreted a gummy oil that made you itch, would you ever touch it?
No.
So what is it doing? It's defending itself. Okay?
I thought that was too easy, so I was like, why?
It has nothing to do with nutrition. What does it support? Nothing.
It's kind of like a pineapple when you try to eat it and then it does that stuff, and apparently it does it to defend itself in a way. It slowly eats the inside of your mouth when you eat it.
So guys, that was not a trick question. Okay, another one. Because of this animal's adaptation, it would be most successful at. So this organism right here, would it be most successful at competing with birds, making its own food, hiding from predators, running very rapid? So, answer that. Let me check it. What would it be doing?
didn't see it until you pointed it out.
Those are
So tell me, what would it be?
C.
Hiding from predators, good, because look it is pretty much camouflage.
Imagine one of those huge ones running at you at full speed.
Okay, up here.
Move very fast.
Which of the following is most likely to cause an increase in predator population? So why would the predators increase? Fewer prey, a reduction in competition, more parasites, a period of drought. What would, don't shout it out, but circle it, increase in predators. Why would you see a lot more predators? Hint, hint, a few of these is going to hurt the predators. For example, if it's fewer prey, it doesn't get enough food, so there would be less, so it's not this. More parasites, more predators would die, and a drought would cause less water. Now, if they did a reduction, less competition, they'd be like, there's no competition, look at all this food, nom nom nom, okay? And then they would increase, okay? So, right there. After being introduced in the 1930s, the fire ant became established throughout much of the southern United States. One biological way to control fire ants might be to introduce organisms that are. So by controlling fire ants, what do they mean? Killing them, decrease them. So how do we decrease fire ants? Ooh, sorry, the last one is cut off. Okay, how do we decrease fire ants? Don't shout it out. By introduce organisms that are mutualistic with the fire ant queens, nurtured by fire ant workers, preyed on by fire ant drones, parasitic to fire ant larvae. Okay, so guys, here's the thing. If you want to get rid of the fire ants, you need to have something that preys on them or is parasitic, because right now, mutualistic means they're helped, so that's wrong. Nurtured means they're helped, that's wrong. Preyed on by fire ant drones.
What's fire ant drones?
That means you're feeding the fire ants in general, because if they're preying on
it's
something,
preyed on by fire ants.
A drone and ants is like a worker bee.
And so if it's preyed on, if it's preyed on by fire ants, you're feeding it. Yep. So guys, the only one out of these is if it's parasitic. That's a good question because it's also about symbiosis too. Okay. Carnate, you don't have to fill this out. This is super easy. Or you could fill it out with me. So carnate means meat, so carnivores eat meat. Example, lions. Herbivore means plants. Herb means plants, so herbivores only eat plants. Example,
Dinosaur.
why do we think of that?
Vegan. Wade Whitley.
I said sunflower.
Like flowers.
Deer, okay? Omni means everything, so omnivores eat both plants and animals, humans, okay? Plants use the energy from the sun to produce sugars. They change the light energy or solar energy from the sun into chemical potential energy in the sugars. Okay? Animals consume plants and other animals. They do this to get the
Energy.
chemical potential energy, good, stored inside of them. And then only 10% of energy gets transferred to the next trophic level. The rest is lost as heat. So for example, if we had a pyramid like this, remember, you have 100, 10, 1.1. Only 10% goes to the next level. 90% gets lost as heat or work, okay? So for example, if we started down here with 55, we'll do 555 joules. How much goes to the next level?
55.
Good, 55. What about the next level?
5.
What about the next level? Good. Okay. So let's do a couple of these together. We actually did this on our last worksheet, so these may sound familiar. Okay. So let's look at this food web. Now really sun should not be there because that's not really part of the food chain. So you have producers, grass, and grains. Then we're gonna label the primary consumers, secondary, all that fun stuff. So if grass is a producer, P, grasshopper is a primary consumer, secondary consumer. Grass is a primary consumer, grass is a producer, primary, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. Grass, producer, mice can also be primary consumer, secondary consumer, producer, primary, secondary consumer, grain is a producer, primary, secondary, producer, primary consumer, secondary, producer, primary, secondary. Did I miss out any? Nope. Okay. So, which organism in this food webs are omnivores? Can eat plants and animals? It's the mice. Get energy from the meat of the grasshoppers or energy from the grass. Good.
Hey, wouldn't the hops be a 3 also?
Because
it goes from grass.
Yes, so ready?
Nice.
Producer, primary, secondary, yep. Perfect. Okay. Wolves and hawks are on the same trophic level because so remember, you're on the same food level because of what you eat and prey on. It doesn't have to do with other things. It's not because they both live on land. No, because they both don't live on land. Hawks live on both. Are both large animals? It's not because they're both large.
Because they
Both eat primary, yes. They're both secondary, so they do both eat primary. Have similar hunting patterns? They do not have similar hunting patterns. It's because of what they eat. Last, which organism in this food web can be described as both a primary and secondary? Primary and secondary, mice. That's why we need to label these. Okay. Sunlight is shown in the food web because producers or autotrophs get their energy from the sun. Decomposers, fungi and bacteria. Fungi are always decomposers, but some bacteria can decompose, okay? Decomposers are heterotrophs because they have to eat their, what they're decomposing, and then whatever they decompose goes back into the ground and then gets reabsorbed and back into the cycle. Are at the top of the pyramid because it's not necessarily they're at the top of the pyramid, but they always are the last stop because they break down everything, okay? They decompose everything. Okay, and this is what we talked about, how we have 100%, 10%, 1.1. Producers are always at the bottom. Producers have the most biomass. So even though bacteria are down here, you're like, how could there be more bacteria than there are humans in biomass? There actually are. Okay. We're just going to keep on going. Okay, let's do this one. Okay. Which of these organisms are in a trophic level that receives a larger percentage of the energy captured by the producer than the percentage received by the bats? What the blank are they asking us? All they're asking us is, which of these organisms are in a trophic level that receives more energy than bats? So guys, in a triangle, who receives the most energy? Things at the top or the bottom? So if bats are here, it's anything under bats. So let's find bats. Here are bats. So technically, insects are lower than bats, and anything, I think insects are the only thing that, okay, anything lower is that. Now, they are not on the list of things, so we have to go outside of the food, of this food chain, and look. Okay, so ready? Let's see what bats is. Producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer. Okay, since insects or none of these are listed, all we have to do, since bats are a secondary consumer, is anything that's a primary consumer or under, okay? Are mountain lions a primary consumer or under?
No.
Heck no, they're producer, primary, secondary. Snakes?
No.
Heck no. Producer, primary, secondary. Hawks?
No.
Producer, primary, secondary. Ground squirrels?
Yeah.
They are only
Primary.
primary. Good. Okay. Okay. A student is asked to draw a food web in which the same organism is a primary consumer as well as a secondary consumer. How should the organism be represented in the food web? Okay, this one you had to figure out, and this was a STAR test question released. Okay, so this organism, I'm primary consumer and a secondary consumer. Let's just say a bird. Okay. Producer. Okay. A student is asked to draw a food web in which the same organism is a primary as well as secondary. Okay. So in this right here, here's a producer. The bird is a primary consumer. Okay. Now I also have to make it a secondary. Let's do producer, grasshopper, back to the bird. Now it's a producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer. So guys, the arrow is coming from the producer to the bird and from the primary consumer to the bird. Ready? The organism must have an arrow pointing from it to a tertiary.
No.
And another arrow pointing from it to a decomposer. That does not make it a primary and a secondary. The organism must have an arrow pointing from it to a secondary consumer and another to a top predator. It could, but that's not what makes it a first and a second. The organism must have an arrow pointing to it from a producer, that's this one here, and another arrow pointing to it from a primary consumer. The organism must have an arrow pointing from it to a primary consumer, and another arrow pointing away from it to a decomposer. No. Okay. Y'all remember this one from your test?
Yep. I do.
Okay, this one's super easy. I want you to do this at your seat. Ready? What is lost to the environment at each of the trophic levels? So I think represented at X. So what do you always lose? You can yell it out, heat. Good. You don't lose nutrients or living space. You don't really lose food. You lose heat from each level. That probably will be a question on your STAR test. Please don't get it wrong. Okay, it's going to be easy. Heat, energy, work. Okay, let's do this one because a lot of people had questions on this one on your test when we did it. Okay. Which of the following lists only organisms that are secondary? Now guys, they could be primary and secondary, or they could be secondary and tertiary, but they all have to at least be secondary in some kind of food web. So guys, do this on your own while I do it up here on the board. Okay, did y'all get H?
Yep.
I went through all of them, and anytime I got to one thing that could never be a secondary, I crossed it out. Mice could never be a secondary, because that's what we're looking for, a secondary, so I crossed that one out. Toads, can toads ever be a secondary?
But, no.
They're only ever tertiary, because look at producer, primary, secondary, tertiary. So they can never be it. Insectivorous birds, same tertiary. Producer, primary. Ooh, they can be secondary. Okay, so this one is right. Seed-eating birds. Nope, seed-eating birds is only primary. So that's how we got to that one.
What about the insects? That's a secondary.
For which one?
It's primary. It's no
The
the
one that you marked correct on G.
yeah. This one.
Predaceous.
I learned about
Yes.
board.
Producer, primary, secondary.
That's a secondary.
So because it can be a secondary, I just clicked it. Now it could be a primary too, but I mean, as long as it can be a secondary in one. So the only one that I found that was all secondaries and didn't at least have one primary that couldn't do it, is H. Okay. This next one. Okay. Which of these represents the trophic level containing 1%? Okay, so start off with which one is the producer at your seat. How much energy do producers have? All the energy, which is what percent? 100. Then go divide by 10 all the way up to the human. Then circle the one that only has 1%. I know you might not know what a phytoplankton is, but this is the beginning of the food chain, so this gets a 100. Move the decimal over, go up. So, if I divide by 10, I come over here, it's a 10. Divide by 10, 1 divide by 10, 0.1 divided by 10, 0.01. They're asking which is 1%. Sand eels. That was a good question.
Can I use yours here?
Yes. Okay. In an energy pyramid for these aquifer cave dwellers, which of the following would be placed at the bottom? So what does the bottom mean? Energy pyramid.
So it's energy.
A producer, good, has the most energy. So who would be towards the bottom? So if blind shrimp eat protozoa, this is at the top, okay? Texas blind salamander eats shrimp and amphipods. So if this eats this, then that eats that, okay? Snails eat Deuteros. What'd y'all put?
Oh wait. What is Deatrice? I just saw that, I was like, I didn't see that Deatrice ate anything else, so I thought that maybe that would be like.
That would be something more of a
But neither does the protozoa. So snails eat that, but does protozoa eat anything? So it's probably photosynthetic.
Yeah, makes sense.
And you know snails are a higher level organism than a protozoa. Okay, next one. The overgrowth of algae poses a major problem for coral reefs. Intensive fishing is one factor that contributes to algae overgrowth because it does which of the following. Okay, so guys, if you fish too much and then algae increases, fish must be what to algae? A predator, good. So, because it does which of the following? Allows more sunlight, inhibits the spread of pathogens, reduces the number of organisms that feed on algae, increase the competition between different algae. Good. So guys, why does it? It reduces the number of organisms that feed. We just talked about them being predators. This was on your test. In recent years, humans have interfered with the natural balance within deer populations in various ecosystems. The interference includes eliminating predators of the deer. Which of the following statements would correctly describe the long-term outcome of this interference? What happens when you get rid of a predator? That organism.
The prey.
Good. So which answer? The deer that are the fastest and most agile will survive. The deer population will be too large to be supported by producers. Other browsing species will thrive and outcompete the deer. The producers will evolve into species that are less palatable to the deer. Y'all, the deer population will become too large. Okay. Next one. A student sets up a compost bin. Inside the bin, microorganisms convert the student's vegetable and paper scraps into rich fertilizer. Which of the following describes the role that these microorganisms play? So, this is them making a compost bin. This is making decomposers, okay? What are the microorganisms gonna do? Balance the number of producers? No. The microorganisms help keep nutrients cycling through the ecosystem? Yes. Let's see if there's anything better. The microorganisms turn solar energy into sugars? No, they're just breaking down stuff. If they use solar energy, they would be autotrophs. The microorganisms function as autotrophs? No. So, they cycle nutrients. They are decomposers. Okay. We had evolution.
Yeah, like
For the last couple, do we listen to the last
There's
one?
one question.
Okay, let's do that one. I was gonna say, do the ones that we kinda skipped over, but we'll just do that last one together. Which of the following are missing from the food web shown below? So guys, at your seat, this is the last thing I want you to do. Label this all the way from P producer all the way up to, I think there's a tertiary consumer. I wanna make sure y'all know how to label these. Ready? So start off with producer. You don't even have to put 1C, you could just do 1, 2, okay? So, answer the question, but come around. I am going to make sure you understand how to do this. In this one right here. 1, 2, 3. But there are going to be a couple different ones. Some of these can be a 1 and a 2. Keep on going. Good. A couple of these should have 2 things next to their name, not just 1.
I think I found it out.
Keep on going. Go this way too. Okay, so ready? Producer, primary, secondary, tertiary. Ready? Producer, primary, secondary. Producer, primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary. Producer, primary, secondary, tertiary. Producer, primary, secondary, tertiary. Producer, primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary. Did I miss any out?
Nope.
Okay, so which of the following are missing from the food web?
Predators.
No. A bunch of things are predators, okay? Phytoplankton, even though you don't know what it is, it's got to be a producer. Omnivores eat both plants and animals. Well, this baleen whale eats the producer and it eats this zooplankton, which is a consumer. So I don't see any decomposers.